Hiya folks, I'm K-Wing, and this is Arkham Wednesdays, the exciting show where we wallop crime right in the kisser. Pardon my French. In today's thrilling chapter, we have a friendly chat about the Batman. To be more precise, the serials from a bygone era that showed what Bob Kane's Comic Crusader was like. So make sure you like, comment, and subscribe, ladies and gents. This is gonna be a gas. Now, due to the success of the Detective Comics, the Batman books, Kane gave the okay for a Saturday serial to be made. Actually, Bob and his company couldn't have been happier, see? They were having a friendly competition with Superman, you hear? Who at the time had a very popular radio program called The Adventures of Superman that started in 1940. So when the opportunity for Batman to become the first DC hero on the silver screen, well, Batman's creator couldn't pass it up. Now, while the serial did create some new original elements for Bat lore, such as the Batcave, the grandfather clock entrance into said cave, and Alfred the Butler, but more on that in a bit, Batman the serial is also super racist, an anti-Japanese propaganda film that makes me a bit sad, along with a lot of other patrons. Then again, the picture was put together during the Second World War, so what can you do? Now, not only did Batman use insults towards our later Japanese friends, they also had a white dude playing a Japanese spy. Seriously, the dude was squinting his eyes and speaking in broken sentences. Lines like this: "You foiled me again, Batman. We will reconvene until a later time." See what I mean? Racist. Also, his base of operations was in an amusement park in Chinatown. To add more salt into the wound, his henchmen were all white mobster guys. If it were me, I would have given the guys gas masks and Japanese uniforms or something, but then again, the budget for this picture was really cheap. Also, it didn't help this movie's setting that many of our Japanese American brothers and sisters were locked away by our own US government. Shame on us, people. Shame on us. So because of this, Batman serial is mostly looked on very poorly, and doesn't stand the test of time at all. Now, some of the dialogue was so bad in this picture that when Sony re-released it on VHS in the 80s and 90s, they removed a lot of chapters and redubbed Batman's voice, so it was a bit different. Also, if you get your hands on this unedited 3-hour film, Batman says some very rude racial slurs that are pretty unimaginable today, but were pretty common back then. He also does them while smiling, which is also out of character for the Batman. Aside from its obvious war setting, which Batman did fight in World War II, by the way, along with Supes after we entered the World War. They also told kids to have their parents buy war bonds, because kids aren't going to go buy war bonds, you know? This film does have some crazy stuff to Batman himself. Let's start with his costume, alright? Because the costume, don't get me started. With what little money they had, the Pictures Company tried to recreate Batman's original look, including the slanted ears. While not a bad idea, they didn't really execute it very well, because what they ended up doing was giving Batman devil horns, which had to be a pretty funny topic during dinner with Mom and Dad after little Jimmy and Susie got back from the Saturday morning matinees, you know what I mean? Trust me, it looks like a guy walking around in an El Diablo getup. How hard would it have been to make his ears, a little bit straighter? Especially when they do shots from the dark and Batman is sneaking around. You see this mythic creature from Hades prancing around in the dark. All that's missing is a pitchfork and some fire. As for the suit, it's terrible. Like a really bad Halloween getup that didn't fit properly. Even Zorro had better pictures than Batman. Better costumes, too. Now, actors Lois Wilson and Douglas Croft played the dynamic duo back in 1943. Croft actually looked like the Boy Wonder, though his hair still really bothers me. It's like Tim Drake before there was Tim Drake. Lewis as the Dark Knight looked ridiculous as the Batman. He also played the part 100% serious. Now, because of this performance and the look of the Caped Crusader, when the film came back during an evening with Batman in the 60s and also a re-showing at the Playboy Mansion at Hef's place, the idea for a campy Batman was born. Pay no attention to my cat. I'm definitely not. Alright? Now, Lois Wilson was also the first Boston actor to play the Batman. Affleck will be the second. Unlike Ben, though, Wilson did nothing to prepare for the role before becoming Batman. While he was a very charming and dashing Bruce Wayne and true to the comics, this Batman had a muffin top. looked out of shape and wheezing as he ran around, and his stunt guy looked even worse than him. The costume changed in each chapter as well. Sometimes the cape would be missing, or it would be blowing on the other side, or it would just not even be put on properly. His belt would also have pockets sometimes, then in the next shot it would be a normal belt. Also, for whatever reason, this Batman likes to hike up his shorts like Steve Urkel. His belt just sits a little below his bat symbol on his chest. Now tell me, folks, what's scary about that? If you saw a guy like that, you wouldn't be afraid, you'd just laugh in his face. People give Bale such a hard time about his Batman voice. Well, Wilson sounded like a typical Bostonian, both as Bruce Wayne and the Batman. I gave Adam West a hard time during the 60s show, but after rewatching the 43 serial for this video, at least West hammed it up as Batman. Lewis does absolutely nothing. The police force are the dumbest in America in this film, for reals. Batman and Bruce Wayne even stand and walk similar. There's no distinction, not to mention they speak exactly alike. So how else did this movie change The Dark Knight? Well, Batman isn't a crime fighter. He's actually a US agent rounding up bad guys and breaking spy rings. Is it just me, or does my 40s announcer voice sound like a young William Shatner? I think that's happening. Oh well. Also, just so you know about this Batman, he's kind of breaking up spy rings, and he's not allowed in the film to be shown bringing in bad guys into justice. The cops would show up and Batman would somehow trick them into taking the credit for catching the bad guys. And then he and Robin would escape, even though they're not wanted by the law. It's just, you know, they disappear in the comics, so they have to do it in the serials. Which just left this kind of like awkwardness to the film, like, okay, that's great. Okay, so what else did this film do? Well, I'm glad you asked. First and foremost, he has a normal car. Now, in Batman's early days in the comics, he actually drove a normal red kind of convertible type car. He also had a 30s mobster mobile, which is basically those round cars that you saw in the Dick Tracy films. That was considered a Batmobile before, you know, the Batmobile. In Batman, I believe it was number 5, after Finger coined the term the Batmobile, Jerry Robinson, the creator of Robin, made the first official Batmobile. It looked like your typical car right out of Dick Tracy. Yeah, see, this is Shatner. I don't think it works anymore. So the only difference was it had a bat mask used to identify the car, and it also acted as kind of like a battering ram. So you had this giant bat mask on the thing. Later, by 1943, Dick Sprang and Bob Kane both redesigned the Batmobile and gave it a more round look and red stripes on the side, along with a more defined bat wings at the end. Yeah, no, this really doesn't work. Oh, wow, I'm insane. For its day, the car is pretty much what you would see when you go out on the street. So it's round, and it worked. But for whatever reason in the film, they were like, we're not going to do that. So when the picture studio began working on the film, they kind of asked Bob and company about the Batmobile. And we're like, I don't think we could do this. And Bob's just like, you have to have the Batmobile. And they're like, okay, so we're gonna use this black Cadillac Towns car to shuttle around Batman and Robin. It's unknown that when they were speaking, you know, to DC and things like that, if they said anything about making the car more Bat-like. That's just a rumor, but I would like to think they actually sat down and talked about that, instead of just doing their own thing. However, because they had a very limited budget, the car that was used by both Batman and millionaire Bruce Wayne is just a Cadillac that's in black, and it has the same exact license plates, and no one was none the wiser, whether it be the crooks, or the police, or Bruce's girlfriend. They're all driving the same car, and they're just... no! Now, to fool the kid audiences into giving the car a dual identity, and they really did this, when Bruce Wayne is driving around, the top goes down to be more elegant and rich-like. However, when Batman is driving the car, the top goes up for action to look fast and dangerous. Now, in the 1949 serial, which featured different actors, they used a red Mercury coupe for both Wayne and Batman. But then in the comics, of course, the Batmobile had a more bubble sci-fi 50s look to it. Then, of course, you know the Batmobile gets a lot weirder after that until we get to the 1960s, which is the Batmobile that we're using because, well, it's cool and it kind of looks old. Anyway, Still, that's actually not the most ridiculous thing about this film. It's the fact that it brought in Alfred the Butler to drive both Bruce Wayne and Batman around all the time. And I'm not messing with you. The police think this English gentleman is very suspicious, being near both Batman and Bruce Wayne and just showing up randomly. It's like Batman didn't think to bring another Zorro-like mask for his chauffeur. You know? Add a little smarticalness. Whatever. So like I mentioned before, both the 43 serial is famous for giving us Alfred the Butler and the Batcave. Now when Kane heard about Batman having a butler named Alfred in the upcoming serials, like a couple months prior or whatever, he quickly introduced the character into the comics as Batman's butler. However, he made some pretty drastic mistakes. The comics Alfred, even though he made his debut before the picture, was nothing like the Alfred that people were gonna see in real life. In fact, comic butler Alfred was fat, short, and bald, and a bit cartoonish too. It was kind of like Wimpy from Popeye, except, you know, I don't know if he really went after hamburgers, but he did have a little quirk about him. And that was he loved reading detective novels, mostly featuring that of Sherlock Holmes. Now, his name also wasn't Alfred Pennyworth. It was Alfred Beagle, and he was the son of Thomas Wayne's butler. Now, movie Alfred, as, you know, he became to be known, was a well-known British actor that was thin, lanky, very poised, and he had a mustache. Also, his last name was Pennyworth for the character, which I believe they just ad-libbed or something. And this is what happens, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, when you jump the gun before more info is released. Now, in 1944, Alfred Pennyworth joins DC officially as Bruce Wayne's butler. In the serials, Alfred is kind of like the comic relief. He shows up, does some funny things, and, you know, you're just kind of like, oh, you know, this isn't the Alfred that I know well into the future. That's because this is Alfred's first appearance. It's gonna be a little weird. Watch some of my videos in the beginning. Total contrast. You know, things change when you kind of start out. Still because of actor, I believe his name is William Austins, or Austin Williams, Austin Powers. Yeah, baby. So, you know, William whatever, he's Alfred's first appearance, and he's actually pretty legendary. Because of this guy, Alfred will forever rock the mustache and have the thin, lanky, you know, proper English gentleman because of this guy. Not the fat, round, pudgy Alfred Beagle. It's Pennyworth. Or nothing. Now, I know part of the reason why you guys wanted to watch this video is information about the famous Batcave. Now, since his creation in the comics, Bruce Wayne used an underground tunnel. He also had a study, like behind a bookcase in a secret room. And he also used an old barn where he had, like, the bat plane, bat helicopter, and the Batmobile at times. But it had no official name. Even after the study was moved into the underground of Wayne Manor, it was just whatever. They showed it as a panel. There was no blurb. There was no nothing. Remember, Batman came out in 1939. Movie serial, you know, was about 4 years later. And the Batcave didn't really play a very big role. Batman would just appear on the scene, or he'd have Robin or Alfred drive him around. Alfred didn't really show for him. I'm just messing. He did that in the movies, though. It was just kind of weird. So what was different about the serial is the Batcave is actually referred to in the script, and I believe as a chapter title called The Bat's Cave, which is a total contrast to what we've seen Batman in the comics doing. He's usually in a really nice place, and he's just in his costume or whatever. So the Bat's Cave is a dim-lit, moody place with bats flying all around, and it has a giant bat insignia, like, carved on the cave wall or, like, hanging up there. I don't know. It's like some type of decoration. And it's the perfect place for Batman to do his brooding. It's his crib underneath stately Wayne Manor, yo. So, in the script for the serial and in the movie, they show Batman has a home. Like, the identity has a place where he can go and do his brooding and other things. You know, it's his bat base, and its official name is the Bat's Cave. So, how did this original idea end up in the comic books? So, the story goes, Jerry Robinson, you know, the guy who created Robin, Kane was looking around the set of the first serial, the 1943 one, and he was speaking with either the art director or the director or somebody on set, and he was really interested about the Bat's Cave or the crime fighting lab, whatever. So afterwards, he immediately rings up Bill Finger, you know, like on one of those old phones, who would be his writer for the popular daily Batman comic strips in New York City, which Batman actually used to be in New York City comic strips, like in the paper, way back in the day. So anyway, he calls up Bill. He's like, "Hey, Bill!" And Bill's like, "What?" He's like, "We gotta change the name of the Bat Base thing." And Bill's like, "We don't have a name for it." He says, "I thought we were going with a hangar or, you know, secret lair or something." And Kane's like, "No, that sucks. I hate that. We're gonna go with Batcave." And Finger's like, "Batcave? Okay." So he starts writing some stuff with the Batcave or whatever, because he was a writer. So when Bob got back to his office that day, he drew up all this stuff for Batman's base. A study, a gymnasium, a lab, a workshop, a hangar, and the garage. He and Bill then rushed the clipping for that evening's issue, or the newspaper or whatever, so it'd be in the morning issue. And on October 1943, I believe it's either October or November, that the Batcave became official. And not only did it have a little picture of it, there was also a detailed account written by Finger that gave the readers kind of like this virtual tour of the Bat's Cave. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is all thanks to the movie serial. Yeah. However, even though that's really cool, the Batcave itself did not make it into DC Comics officially into 1944. You know, during the war. And it's actually a huge staple for the Batman and Robin mythos to this day. But it's all thanks to the movie serial and whoever the writers were for that. Now, as for the film itself, the Batman serial is not a typical movie. It's not really a good movie either. Each chapter runs between 10, 15 to 20 minutes, depending on what type of cliché cliffhanger is at the end of it, forcing the audience to return next Saturday to see how Batman survived the villain's crazy death traps, or something like how did Batman survive being thrown out of an airplane, or an explosion at a mine, or whatever. You know, being bopped on the head with the butt of a gun and put into a coffin, or you know, or a Chicago sack, or whatever they called it back in the 40s. The plot is pretty simple, and it's very anti-Japanese. The bad guy, which I shied away from because, it's bad. The bad guy, doctor, whatever, is sent by the Emperor of Japan at that time. I believe the doctor's name is Dr. Daka, or whatever, and he's there to spy on America and somehow destroy the American way of life by creating brain zombies, among other things. The Jap Villain was played by an Irish-American film actor, and I forget the guy's full name, but it's like Joseph Patrick Carl something. I want to say Niche or Nash, whatever. He actually went on to play more Axis bad guys, both Italiano, German, and also I think he was in the Rising Sun film. No! But yes, it happened. So, I mean, they got him to do, like, all these bad guy and mobster roles, even after World War II. What's amazing about this actor, though, in Hollywood is they never called him to play an Irishman in pictures, even though he was Irish. Isn't that just mean? Anyway, for 15 chapters, we get to watch Batman and Robin fight on rooftops, interrogate thugs in the Bat's Cave, and it looks like Batman's holding, like, this laser gun in the stills or whatever. He does some stuff in his car, and Batman drives it, and Robin drives it, and Robin is supposed to be like 12 or 13, so you see Robin driving the car, he's like, I'm cool, I'm driving, you know, and it's just like, no. You also get to see Alfred act really funny and suspicious in the film, and then of course you watch a white dude disguised as an Asian dude, and you see the various demise of the evil doctor's henchmen from all kinds of crazy contraptions. Robin, while looking a bit odd for me in both serials, and I know it's played by two different youngsters, the first serial, 1943, I may be wrong about this, but I don't think so. The actor, when they were filming, was about 11 or 12 years old, and he's actually the juvenile boy wonder, like, off the pages of DC Comics. Like, he is the first actor that really is the same age as Robin. Like, you know, he's this little kid who's following Batman around on all his murderous, crazy, war-filled adventures and dodges being eaten by alligators James Bond style. I mean, this is really the 12-year-old that you could envision yourself running around with Batman. Now, the boy actually hardly makes any wisecracks. Like, he's not really doing a Burt Ward thing because that really hasn't come into style yet, so there's no holy this and that. You know, he's just this silent kid who saves Batman a few times. And one thing that I noticed that was interesting about this movie, or serial, excuse me, and both serials, is that they bring up this idea for the bad guys because they're trying to figure out how Batman survives all these crazy death traps and situations they put him in. So they've come up with that there's called the Club of Batmen. So what it is, when this guy dies, another Batman takes his place and just like picks up where he left off. So that to them makes more sense than one guy able to survive all this other stuff. It's not true though, it's really Bruce Wayne as Batman, but the bad guys think it's a club of dudes disguising themselves as a Batman. In reality, what happens is Robin follows Batman around and he saves his bacon pretty much. So if something happens to Batman, Robin sneaks in all ninja-like and he somehow rescues Batman. But they also add a realistic approach to it. See, Robin, being the young boy that he is, he's no match for these bad guys twice his age and size. So in his utility belt, he carries around a wrench or a flap jacket, like one of those like things that really hurt people, you know? And he smacks people over the head with it, which is very violent, but it'd also be like, how is a 12-year-old going to fight a dude in his 40s or 30s? You're going to hit him with a wrench. Kids, don't try that at home. I don't think your parents would appreciate that. But it was interesting to see that type of stuff. And I actually watched it a couple times because they're like, what is Robin carrying in his hand? And I freeze-framed my DVD player, and I was looking at it, and I blew up the image in Photoshop, and it's a wrench. And I'm just like, that is messed up. So that's what he would do. He would save Batman, knock the guy over the head with a wrench, and then they would, you know, replace Batman with that person. As for other elements in the 43 serial, Batman has a love interest, some dame with really nice gams, which means legs. Her uncle or father, I forget, whatever, has been wrongfully convicted of being a traitor to the U.S., and he's working with the, quote, Japanese devils, as the film puts it. Eventually, this guy becomes a victim of the electric brain drain, which is the name of the first chapter, and somehow he gains, like, superhuman zombie strength, and they wear, like, these really weird sweaters, and they have this weird contraption on their head. Personally, I really couldn't watch this film all the way through, though, not without adding my own dialogue over top of it, because it's just ridiculous. When I was a kid, I saw the serials for the first time in the 90s on VHS, though parts were missing entirely. I remember my dad and I rented what we thought was the last chapter, but it turned out to be the 1949 serial. So here you are, little me, going in, you want to see how the last, cliffhanger happened with Batman. You pop in this new VHS. Not only are all the actors different, but the story's completely different. Instead of a crazy Japanese doctor, now we have a crazy white doctor who's trying to bomb the world or something with blimps. And it's just like, what? So the cliffhanger was Batman survived a mine explosion instead of, like, alligators? I'm confused. So basically what happened was, when Sony re-released the films on VHS, they removed parts of the Japanese story, which is incredibly racist, and they just, like, removed chapters that made the whole thing not make any sense, and they added more of the action sequences. But it looked like the Japanese guy got away and won because, you know, they didn't want him to have a grisly demise eaten by alligators, you know? So, oh, and before I forget too, they also redubbed a lot of the Batman dialogue. So earlier this year, both serials were actually re-aired on Turner Classic Movies, I believe, and it was to help celebrate Batman's 75 years. And just like when it was originally released, it was the unedited version, and the film was every Saturday, and they did it for several months. So they had, like, you know, several episodes to air. Now, while this film did alright, showcasing the Bob Kane Batman fighting organized crime, it's pretty goofy. I'm not gonna lie. The second serial, called Batman and Robin, goes even more loopy, but at least it adds Vicky Vale into the movie. The good thing about those serials, though, it's not really war propaganda films. It's still really cheesy, though. Like having the bat signal work during the day, or Batman pulling out a blowtorch when he has no room on his belt for one. It's just kind of like facepalm moments, and you're like, flabbergasted, like, how did he do that? But without the 43 and 49 serials, I will say this, who knows where Batman would be today in cinema? I shudder to think. Anyway, thanks for watching another Arkham Wednesdays. To the wingding that challenged me to do this lore, I really hope you liked it and learned something from it. Well, the world of Fallout 4 awaits me yet again. In the comment section below, feel free to suggest the next lore topic in the comments below. Have a great rest of your night, and I'll see you on the next Arkham Wednesdays. God bless and happy gaming. See you.